Lann greets you with a nod. Here for a chat? I've been waiting for you to come and see what strange beast you've taken into your party. Well, I would really like to get to know you a bit more, Lann. Let me guess. Your first question is, can you wear a hat with your one horn? Am I right? So, wasn't going to be, but can you wear a hat with your one horn? Sure I can. But certain designs don't suit me too well. Lann speaks in a deadly serious voice. Okay, well, I do have some questions. I'm just curious why you speak common so much better than the rest of your tribe. Funnily enough, common isn't all that common underground, Lann says. But your observation is correct. I used to live on the surface with my parents for a while, and I had a chance to learn a couple things. The language, and the fact that every peasant who sees my scaly mug screams, "Demon!" and runs away. I don't know if you're interested, but my mom wasn't from an underground tribe. She was a smuggler, the kind that used the dungeons of Canabras to secretly move and store goods. One time, two gangs couldn't agree on how to share a prime cut, got into a fight, and the winner threw the losers down a hole, dead and living alike. My dad went to check if the corpses had anything useful on them, and he found a girl from the surface, barely clinging to life. An incredible feeling sparked between them, or maybe the girl just liked men with scales and a cat nose. That might be it. One way or another, he got her back on her feet, and he later even left his home caves. She left her smuggling behind, and they began an honest life together. That's the delightful story of how old Lann came into the world. The next chapter, however, well, my family and I never stayed in one place for long. We lived sometimes on the surface, sometimes underground. We couldn't find a place to call home. Living in the caves was hard on my mom, and my dad's appearances raised too many questions in Mendev. They're at war against demons after all. In the end, my parents decided to stop making each other miserable and separated. My father and I returned to our tribe. I think the peasants screaming "Demon" had something to do with it. Or maybe Dad just couldn't stand life without rat tail soup. I wouldn't rule out the possibility. So the reason you came with me, was it so you could see the surface again? No, that wasn't it. I just don't have much patience for certain types of creatures. Demons, I mean. If they want to destroy Canabras, I'll be on the side of the people they're attacking. Lann looks away. Lann, you're my companion, and companions should trust each other. I'm counting on you to give me honest answers, not excuses. Lann looks ashamed. I guess you're right. I shouldn't have been so evasive. It's just that some things are hard to talk about. My family, for example. My birth, hell, take me, turned out to be a great misfortune for my parents. All because I'm relatively healthy. I'm the best thing that came from a marriage between a cave-dwelling mongrel and anyone from the surface. A healthy child with the right number of hands and feet, and no apparent defects, no missing organs or other problems. They saw hope in me, so risked having more children. They thought it would somehow be alright. A growl edges into Lann's voice. I could have had 4 brothers. The first was born 2 years after me, and died 3 years later. He didn't have a nose, nothing even remotely resembling one. He could only breathe through his mouth. Mom and Dad were afraid to take their eyes off him, for fear he'd choke and suffocate on something. But in the end, it was his weak heart that killed him. Then there was another pregnancy, and birth. I pretended I was sleeping, but snuck out of my bedroom and listened under the door. All those hours. It was very strange, but I never heard the newborn screaming. Mom moaning, yes. The priest praying. Then I dared to open the door a little and looked inside. The priest stood there, very pale. One of them was holding something, a small object that fit in his palm. He asked, "Do you know what this is?" And the other said, "I think it's a head." Lann stops. "Whoa, enough. You do not have to keep going if it hurts you." "Hell no. I started to tell you, and I'll make it to the end. You want to know why I followed you to the surface? Well, here's the reason." Lann pauses, exhales, and continues in a steadier voice. It turned out this time, Mom was expecting triplets. The first of the babies was born in pieces, and the two others didn't live long enough to draw their first breath. About 3 weeks later, my father took me to the caves. He didn't want to leave. I could see it in his face. But I think my mom and he decided it together. The curse my people have, carried since the First Crusade, stood between them. Not to mention the 4 dead babies. An old age was rapidly taking its toll on my father. After he returned to the cave, he only lived another 4 years. So, if you're asking me why I decided to go up with you to the surface and join the Crusaders, well, the answer is, I've always wanted to. I was afraid to leave my tribe, but it always haunted me that I'd die in a world where 4 crusades could do nothing to stop the beast from the abyss, and the number of victims kept growing. I want to change that, or at least try to. And if changing things is too much to ask, then at least get a little revenge. The ones who are behind the world wound owe me a great debt. The lives of 4 brothers. All my mother's tears. My father's broken heart. It's a lot. It's so much that killing a couple of demons won't do it for me. I want to do something real, and I am ready to pay any price. Call it my personal crusade if you like. Lann gives you a slanted grin. I used to think that things would be better if I'd never been born, but now I think I was born for this, to settle the score. Well, why didn't you go up and join the Crusaders before now? I couldn't just abandon my tribe. I'm their best hunter. They'll have it much harder without me, but now that the demons have nearly destroyed Canabras and the caves almost clapped on our heads, sitting and waiting it out just wasn't an option anymore. Anyway, I'm more useful up here than I am down there. Plus, the chief let me go, which means my debt to the tribe has been paid. Would you like me to help you find your mother then? No. The word flies from Lann's mouth faster than an arrow. Then after a pause, he continues. I don't want to meet her. Not because I feel any resentment. It's just that she's a half-elf. She's barely got her first gray hair, and I'll be a ramshackle old man. She's buried enough children. There's no need to make her witness the death of another one. I hope you understand. I am very sorry, truly. Lann smiles, this time sadly. Well then, I'm very lucky. I met someone who not only helped me choose the right path, but is happy to listen to me whining. You know, your parents' love didn't survive hardship. Doesn't mean the same thing will happen to you. What if you find true love? Someone who won't leave you no matter what. And break my beloved's heart when I die in her arms 5 years later? That'd be a fine thing to do to a person you love. Then again, I guess there's a chance I'll inspire some tragic bard to write a tearful ballad. Well, thank you for sharing all this, Lann. I have another question. Mongrels, they have very short lifespans, as you mentioned. But you don't look like you're getting old or dying at all. You're looking all right. How old are you? Lann chuckles. I am as old as I look. No surprises there. But remember Saul? He's only 10 years older than me. I remember him back when he was a fearless warrior, and day by day I watched him turn into an old man. him and my father. It happens very quickly. First you miss a shot because you don't see the target as clearly as you used to. You think it's because your eyes are tired. You tell yourself it'll get better tomorrow. Then you notice that you're having trouble breathing, that climbing is harder than before. Lann clenches and unclenches his human fist. Your fingers stop bending. You have to tie your sword to your hand. You can't even put on your greaves without help. When you're washing your face in a stream, sometimes you get sight of a gray-haired, wrinkled old man you don't recognize. And this goes on, until one day, you come across a cave beast and you realize you can't outrun it. Lann takes a breath. My dad kept diaries, marking all the signs, and I saw it too. The last year, I had to help him get out of bed, help him dress, remind him to eat. Sometimes he forgot my name. I told him that we should have stayed on the surface, and he joked that dodging a goddess was behavior unworthy of a crusader. He meant Pharasma. It's the goddess of death, if you don't know. Every morning, I wake up and check how I feel. But there are no signs yet. Even so, I know I don't have much time. I need to do something useful before I forget why I came here. Are you okay to talk about Wendewog? Are you sure? Alright. Well, what about your connection to her? My connection to Wendewog. I mean, where do I start? Lann turns the unexpressive reptile face half of his face to you. We grew up together, trained together. She was the chief's daughter. She was groomed to be the best all her life. And then I came along. We were rivals, but we dragged each other out of tight spots, too. I've always been drawn to grand, heroic gestures, sometimes idiotic ones, whereas Wendu liked to roam unexplored passages, finding new caves and making maps. She wanted to be a great huntress, the one who'd make it through the shield maze, but instead she... he shakes his head. It'd be better if she died. The death of a friend is painful, but watching a friend become a shadow of their former self is... well, it's unbearable. According to her, she doesn't think she's a shadow of her former self. Of course, she thinks she did everything right, because the second she starts to doubt herself, she'll have to face the truth. To admit that she's just a cannibal that demons use as they wish. Lann frowns, looks almost like a wince. She wants to get stronger and stronger, but for what? I'll never understand what drives her. I know this is kind of a sensitive question, but were you guys ever more than friends? Oh wow, you really don't pull your punches, do you? Lann exhales loudly. There was a time when I asked myself the same question. Wendewog knew me better than anyone. She understood me better than anyone. She was my first woman. But we never loved each other. Maybe I could have grown to love her, but it always seemed like she never understood what love was. Maybe she just wasn't capable of those kind of feelings. Oh, thank you, Lann, for that. Thank you for this conversation. I think I found out everything I need to know. Thank you. Sure thing. Oh, except there's a lot more to talk about. How about, tell me a little bit about your people. Oh, of course. What would you like to know? Well, what's it like living in your caves? Oh. And then gives you a broad smile. The smile is strange, as if it falters with his human features meet his animal ones. Imagine that in the entire world there's only a few hundred like you. There's not an inch of fertile ground anywhere. Nowhere to grow grain for bread, or cotton, or linen for cloth. Your neighbors are beasts who want to eat you, or parasites who want to infect you with their larvae, and then eat you. And it's not that bad, because you can try to eat most of the things that are trying to eat you. Sometimes at the risk of getting poisoned, sometimes with almost no risk at all. In the worst years, there's not a single living thing around to be found, predator or prey. And that's when you eat mushroom soup. I'd say 3 times a day, but there is barely enough for once every 3 days. Lann shrugs. But life underground had its upsides, pun intended. There's no risk of losing the roof over your head. There's no bad weather either, not counting the earthquakes, of course. And are you all really the descendants of the first Crusaders? More like demon spawn, aren't we? Sad but true. Without the demons, there would be no mongrels. It's the magic of the world wound that affected our ancestors and made the children the way they are. Like most in our tribe, Chief Soul fancies himself a descendant of the underground Crusaders, the ones our heroic ancestors left to guard the caves. I don't know if it's true or not. The angel came to our caves for a reason. Maybe he remembered us. Those were evil and dangerous times after the First Crusade. Hundreds of Crusaders began having children, and the babies were born with fangs and horns and warts that covered their face. People didn't like the new look. The Inquisitors sure didn't. So our ancestors fled persecution and made a home for themselves down there, under the ground. They probably intended to find a cure for their children and hoped to return in time. But it never happened. Instead, the World Wound's terrible legacy was passed down from generation to generation. Mongol parents can only guess what their children will look like. Each of us is born with a new mutation. Many mutations are fatal. Lann stops, then goes on quietly. Down in the caves, we usually don't congratulate the family for the birth of a child until they turn at least 3. Most don't even get a name before that. There's no point. What I don't get, it hasn't been long since the First Crusade. Why do you know so little about your ancestors? Well, our lives are much shorter than most uplanders. Up here, only a few generations passed, and many still live who remember old Sarkarosis as it stood untouched by demons. Queen Gallifrey, for example. But where we live, mongrels start getting old much earlier than humans, much faster, and with more devastating consequences. Few live past 40, and fewer still live long enough to die of old age. Hunger, disease, and monsters from the deep are more effective killers than time. So for us, the story of the First Crusade is a legend that happened generations ago. There are no living witnesses. We have a tale of the wise and great ancestors who left us to stand guard in the catacombs. But in reality, I suspect there are desperate wretches who couldn't figure out how to spell the demonic plague and who were abandoned by their own kind. How do you tell the difference between day and night down there? You can't see the sun, obviously. Well, every mongrel settlement has a big gong, which we treat like a relic. The gong keeper hits it twice a day to mark the beginning and end. But this custom doesn't keep time very precisely. Every mongrel child has snuck up to the gong to strike it at the wrong time at least once. Just out of pure mischief. Nothing could keep me away from it, not even the fact that I only have one ear, which means it would take double the punishment once I was caught. So sometimes the wrong strikes get mixed in with the right ones, and the tribe can find itself jumping up to greet the morning in the middle of the night. Do mongrel tribes ever fight each other? There were some skirmishes, and I've been forced to kill my kinfolk before, too. Lann speaks in a steady voice. Fights most often break out over food. We have laws in the caves, written and unwritten rules that we follow. We respect one another's rights to live, but hunger, well, it can push a person over the edge. I've never, you can count on that, stolen someone else's kill. But I can understand those of my kin who've tried. To hear your kids begging for food and not be able to feed them is terrifying. He frowns and goes silent. I've noticed you're the only member of your tribe to call your people mongrels. Why is that? Because all of Galarian calls us that. I don't see the point of all this hemming and hawing over what we're called. Anyone who finds it offensive or takes issue with it can lead the charge against the name. No one's stopping them, but personally, I'm not going to pick a fight over something as unimportant as a name. Oh, thank you for that. For the conversation, I mean, anyway. What do you think of life on the surface? It must be very different from life underground. Oh, of course. As far as living conditions, the surface is definitely a better place to be. It's easier to get good food and water, not to mention to build a house and even grow a few things. In older, well-established settlements, you don't have to deal with anything scarier than rats, or maybe foxes stealing chickens. As for the kind of lives you have, I heard a story about demon worshippers abducting a whole family and sacrificing them one by one while the others watched. But there were some brave crusader knights nearby, and they killed the villains and saved everyone. And I heard another story. A young blacksmith lost his arm in a fire. Couldn't work to feed his wife and baby. They tried their best and lived from hand to mouth, but they're still very destitute, and in the end, the desperate blacksmith robbed a traveler one night on the road. But there were some braver crusader knights nearby, and they caught the robber and threw him in prison. Not long after, his wife smothered the baby and hung herself. Yikes. Up here, the same person can proudly say he's protecting the innocent from demons, and then look the other way while the same innocent starves just because they were born into a poor family. Queen Galfrey prolongs her life with sun orchid elixirs that cost enough to feed an entire city. Back in our caves, everyone is equally poor, and if one person starves, the whole tribe starves. We don't abandon our own in times of trouble. That's the power of a tribe. The laws of the surface are made so that some get everything and others get nothing. I might just be a naive fool from the caves, but I don't understand how it's possible to have so much more and share so much less. Anyway, look who I'm talking to. You must know life on the surface much better than I do. Well, I know I'd never leave a needy person in trouble, and I've been given more than most, which means I'm now more able to help others. That is a fitting reply, and please don't take my words as a reproach. I like grumbling as much as cracking jokes. Lann is obviously trying to muster a friendly smile, but it's an expression his face doesn't accommodate very naturally. You said earlier that you're prepared to risk your life to do something meaningful. What do you mean by that? Well, to invent a new salad and have it named after me, of course. Lann remarks grimly, then he sighs. Truth be told, I don't know. It'd be much easier if all I really wanted was to kill demons. Then a few more demons, then more demons after that. Good honest rage and no needless brooding. I think I actually envy the warriors who can live like that. But I can't. It's life. If life's taught me anything, it's that there are no easy choices. Dying a glorious death isn't enough. Some heroes of the Crusaders did that and also saved entire settlements, erected the Warden Stones. Their actions kept the lands of Mendev safe for decades. That's what I want. For my dumb, short life to have meant something. You think I have an exaggerated opinion of myself? Some scaly freak crawls out of the caves and wants to take control of the Warden Stones and flaunt Yamade's banner. Well, any fool can charge at the front lines of the demonic armies and die there. But what good will that do? I want something. Something meaningful, you know? Even if I have to pay the highest price. Well, especially if I have to pay it. There are plenty of worthier people who need to survive this war and tell everyone else what nutcases we were. Well, thank you for the conversation, and I think this is actually where it ends, but we'll see. Thank you for your answers so long.